This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. Welcome to the show.
This is American Real TV,
There's so much to talk to you about.
where everyone
You are a true inspiration.
has
We're all trying to do our part to change the world.
a story.
What's your mission? What do you want your legacy to be? You have such a great story. I cannot wait to share it. Welcome to the American Real family. I cannot wait to air this episode.
And now, here's your host, Roger Brooks.
Writing a book is no small feat. It requires countless hours of imagination, persistence, and a deep passion for storytelling. Today's guest, best-selling author John Kinney, has accomplished just that in his first novel, Closer Than Blood. John's work captures the complexity of human relationship and the intricacies of the human mind. Closer Than Blood is a gripping tale that not only entertains, but also provokes thought and emotion, demonstrating John's talent as a celebrated storyteller, renowned for his unique narrative artistry. With his tales, John transcends boundaries, immersing his audience in captivating worlds of beauty and depth. His narratives touch on diverse themes, delving into life's complexities, relationships, and the very essence of the human experience. Join me as we delve into the world of Closer Than Blood and explore the journey behind its creation. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this, and I just want to start out by saying that you and the American Real publishing team has been amazing in getting this project to where it is, and I look forward to ongoing with you. And again, thanks to you. If I mention everybody, it'll take us 45 minutes. I'll just say the American Real publishing team.
I appreciate it. And look, this is what happens when there's a good partnership in place. Everything from cover design, to the interior layout. We did this together as a team, and I think your book came out beautifully. And I'm also excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. And let's just start with the evolution of Closer Than Blood. How did this whole concept come to be? I mean, there's a lot of people in this world that say, I'm going to write a book someday. And very few people actually follow through. So tell us about the evolution.
Wow. Well, the evolution, Roger, actually started about 17 years ago, let's just say. The story it had been coming together for many years before that date, but different things that happened in my life and different things that happened in people that I know lives, and started coming together, and I was just thinking about the scenes of things playing out in my life and other people's lives. So actually, when I started writing, well, let me go back a second. It really starts with my three kids when they were pretty much babies. When I finally got the idea in my head for the story, I sat them down on the couch 17 years ago, and I explained to them this concept of a story. These are kids I'm talking to, babies pretty much. And I explained to them this whole concept of a story. It wasn't named Closer Than Blood at that time, but that was the idea in my head. And their reaction to the story, I always told them stories as kids, but their reaction to this story kind of blew my mind. And when I started writing it, I really didn't write it as a book, Roger. It wasn't written as a book. I had all of these scenes coming together in my head as the characters started to develop. I was visualizing a movie. So I actually wrote down the backstory of a movie, and it just kept going on and on and on and on. And before I knew it, I had about 800 pages to 900 pages of information. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you need to put this in book form." But I said to myself, well, nobody's going to read an 800-page book. And it really wasn't edited to the version of a book. It was more of a movie or, a streaming service. So that was my thought. So it took me a while to started editing and cutting things out and trying to get it into a readable book form. And the years that have gone by was actually on purpose because I thought the story was just so unique, especially the ending, which blows people's minds. That's really what gets everybody, you know, up and up. Just their emotions just go wild once they hear the ending. Um, I started putting all that together, and when I finalized everything, it was all based on that ending. So that helped me cut things down to about 300 or 400 or 500 pages, and I still needed to cut more. So I brought in some people. And then, of course, the American Real Publishing team came into play and really made this thing, the bestseller as as it is now. So thank you for all your support.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm always fascinated because I'm a writer as well. Before I
Yes,
started the publishing company, um, you know, writing is my first love. But I also love helping people like you
right.
bring your book to life. So, it's always fascinating to me to talk to other authors to see, how these ideas come to you,
Yeah,
and then how you end up putting out 900 pages and then editing it down. It's a lot of work, but it's really a passion project in
yeah.
from my perspective. And where did you find the time to do all?
Wow. Well, I kind of took a vacation, and that's the whole 17-year process. Because as I wrote, of course, as you know, being a writer yourself, there comes a time where you have writer's block, so you don't write for 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes it was months for me. But I took a short vacation away from everything, and so I'm going to at least get the bones of this thing together. So I just continued to write, and then there was a point, Roger, where the writing I couldn't stop. I actually became absorbed into the story. Like I was on the pages, I was on the screen. I mean, I was talking to these individuals, I was watching them converse and go back and forth with one another. And I just continued to write. And at one sitting, I would say I probably wrote maybe 10 chapters,
Wow.
at one time, which was about 3 or 4 thousand words, that I just continued to write. And then there were times where there were scenes occurring where I would get really emotional. Like there's a funeral scene and there's a wedding scene, and then there's some tragedy that occurred, and it all just started making sense, and they actually came to life. Because as I mentioned earlier, Roger, a lot of things in there, as you and I put it together, it's fictional, of course, but a lot of the things that happened in this story occurred in my life.
Yeah.
So a lot of it came natural. And then once the characters came to life to me, it was like they jumped off the pages and they were standing with me, telling me what to write. And I just continued to write. And I purposely wanted to wait for some time to see if I heard a story like this one. So I said I'm going to give myself maybe 2 or 3 years. Wound up being longer, but I haven't read, seen, or heard anything like this story. I mean, Roger, is not just it's like a story within a story, because the ending, and I may start talking a lot, Roger. I hope you don't mind me just going
Oh,
on.
no problem.
The ending is so dramatic and touching. In order to understand and have that ending hit you like it hits me, it still hits me. I've read it thousands of times, you know this.
Yep.
And to have it hit you like it hits me, you have to understand the characters. You have to know how they became closer than blood. And once you understand the characters, you become a part of their lives. Then you understand how such a mystical event, a phenomenon, could take over their lives and lead them to that dialogue, to that ending. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
And yeah,
yeah,
speaking of the characters and the creation of the characters, let's delve into a couple of them. And obviously, we want people to
yeah.
get the book and read the books. We don't want to give everything away, but
I get it. Yes,
talk
yes,
about some of your, we have Jonathan, we have Danielle, we have Patrick and Stacy. Uh,
yes.
Give us some insight around them.
Well, the funny thing is, Jonathan, I believe it or not, Roger, Stacy was the first character.
Hmm.
People would think that Jonathan, because he's such a dynamic personality within the story, that he would have been my first creation, but it actually started with Stacy, believe it or not. But anyway, Jonathan was supposed to be me, but as I continued to write, he was more athletic than me. He was taller than me. He was more good looking than me. So Jonathan became a cousin of mine. Okay, his persona kind of took on the persona of one of my cousins. Unfortunately, he passed away, but it wasn't long after he passed away that I started writing this story. And the more I wrote about it, the more his life or his personality took over, and he actually became Jonathan. Danielle is a mixture of a few people in my life. Her actual her makeup is from people that I actually know. Her looks, the way I describe her in the book as her culture and everything. She's a couple of people, a couple of different people. All of them are a couple of different people. Patrick is more of the geeky type. To be honest with you, when I started writing Patrick, I was thinking about Brad Pitt. I was thinking about Brad Pitt and some movie I was watching that Brad Pitt was in. He was sort of a geeky type person, but he was one of the best looking geeks that you would come across. And that's how Patrick came to life. Stacy was more of since she was first, she was more of a serious person. Again, a couple of people that I know in my life. And from Stacy, Danielle was created. And then from their relationship, Jonathan was born. And then from Jonathan needed a sidekick. So therefore, Patrick came into play. So that's actually how they came to life.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I'm sure people that are listening that have never written a book are also thinking, wow, that's kind of how this all works is the author has the freedom, when you're writing fiction to
Yeah.
create these characters out of whatever you want. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear how you made all that come together. Just curious, the main character, Jonathan, what was the shift? Because initially you thought this character would resemble more of you, and then
Yeah.
you took on the life of more of someone like your cousin. When did that shift happen, and why? Was it as you started writing the story?
As I started writing the story, um, he was more, I think I'm more of I'm not as personable, put it that way, in my own life as Jonathan um, was, or is, I should say. I think probably maybe about 20% um, writing the first few chapters, I started to feel that he was bigger than me. He was different than me. He became, in order for him to develop the relationship with Patrick, Danielle, and Stacy, he had to be more than what I was. Okay, because people will say to me that my first impressions aren't, I'm mean. Some people say that I'm mean, but I tell them that I'm more focused and right. But he was more outgoing, more personable, more good looking. He started to look better as I continued to write. He was a football player. He became I don't want to give the whole story away, but he was athletic. And although I was athletic in my life, he was bigger. I envisioned him as being a bigger person, 6 feet plus,
Yeah.
with this massive body, which I don't have, Roger.
But again,
So
it's great that how this whole thing
yeah,
develops,
yeah, yeah,
and you're able to weave and mold it as you write.
yeah. Well, the characters, Roger, this, you're right. So, the characters took over.
Mhm.
They took over me and they pretty much told me what to write. Um, they just told me to just sit back and watch us dialogue. And that's pretty much what I did. I just watched them and listened to them as they talk. That's why I had 900 pages. I probably could have had 1,500 pages if I continued to write, but I was just writing down what they were saying. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's so great. A lot of times I talk to other authors and they have the same feeling like, where does this inspiration come from? Is it a higher power? Is it, you getting in tune with, the universe or whatever, you may call it, or God, or whatever it is,
Right.
but it's actually a pretty spiritual experience in my opinion.
No, absolutely, Roger. You're right. I connected. There's a point where I think when you first start writing, especially when you're writing a story like this, a novel like this, um, there is a connection that occurs between you and the characters, and they kind of pull you into the story. And I think that's what happened. I think their closeness. When I say to people that you're going to experience something that you haven't experienced before when you read this. It's not just a great read. I think I say this in one of my. I think in the trailer that Roger and I we put together, that me and American Real Publishing put together. I think I make that statement that it's not just a good read, but it's an experience.
Yes.
It's it's an experience, and they grab you by the collar and they make you watch and listen. It's like one of those series or stories on television where at first you may say, yeah, it's okay. And then all of a sudden, something happens and it grabs you and you binge it for the rest of your weekend.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's
exactly.
what happened. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I just wanted to say before I forget, what really got me motivated after I would say I was in my 15th year of this project. I was in Florida, and a friend of mine that I met in Florida, just off the cuff one day, I just happened to tell her about the story. And I gave her a book of the original version. I don't want to mention the name of it, but the original version of it. I gave her a copy of it, and she read it. And because of the editing, that's really how I got to American Real Publishing, because I didn't like the way it was edited before until American Real Publishing came on board. But anyway, I gave her a copy of the book and she read it. And she admitted to me that, there would need to be some editing, but she said the story is amazing. And I had heard that from hundreds of people before, especially my son, who've been telling me for literally 17 years, you got to get this thing out. And, that went on for a while. And then two other friends of mine in Florida, just one day, I was just sitting out on their patio and I said, I want to tell you a story about a book I wrote. And I told them the story. And I actually let them read a copy before, again, it got to AR Publishing. And they were blown away and I said, there's got to be something to this. I mean, when one or two or three or four or five people say this is amazing, you gotta get this out. But when hundreds of people say the same thing, you got to do something about that. And then one day, I'm looking on my phone to show you that our phones listen to what we say, Roger. I'm on my phone going through my Facebook, and this guy pops up on my page. He looks just like you, as a matter of fact. And he had this big AR behind him, and he was talking about um, him being a publisher. And that's actually what drew me to you guys, because I knew you were a writer, and as a writer, you mentioned on the outset that what we go through when
Yeah.
we're trying to get our work out. And it drew me to you. And again, I didn't know who you were, so I wasn't looking for you, but you popped up on my Facebook page. So your marketing is pretty good.
The power of advertising.
The power of advertising. So you popped up, and I listened to you, and you were just saying the things that I needed to hear. Because as you can imagine, and we get thousands of phone calls. Somehow when our work hit pages, people get it. And I was getting phone call after phone call after phone call, but it was just something about your presentation. So I filled out, the information, and Gina Butler called me, and she wasn't telling me what I needed to hear, because that's what a lot of they're trying to sell you something. So they think they tell you what they want to hear. She wasn't doing that. She was straight to the point, and she introduced me to you. And then I was driving back from Florida back to Cleveland when I decided that I'm going to try this Roger guy out. And then, of course,
That's awesome.
the appointment was made, and that's how it happened, Roger. That's how it happened. And I know I'm talking a lot, but this is about my story. So
Yes,
I
sir.
think I have the floor here. But anyway, when you came on, you didn't pull any punches. You said, "Hey, it's just the way it is. Um, it's going to cost this. It's going to cost that." It wasn't about cost for me at that point, though, because in between that time, I did all my research on Roger Brooks. I Googled everything I could about Roger Brooks. And you were just saying the things that I needed to hear from someone that was talking like me. So thank you again. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
This,
My
this
pleasure.
Roger, is the work of American Real Publishing. You see that #1 best-selling author?
Right. That's
Thank you,
right.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it is a partnership. It's definitely a partnership. There are a few questions I wanted to ask you in relation
Okay.
to talk about the world of the shaman.
I'm glad you asked that, Roger. First of all, let me just say this. I mentioned to you earlier that a lot of the things in the story happened in my life. And I happened to have an experience with a shaman in my own life in Africa. I was in Africa for a couple of years, and it wasn't for me, actually. It was from a friend of mine. A friend of mine were talking about, they call them sangomas in Africa, which is a shaman. Um, and they had an experience with a shaman, and when it happened, they happened to be in my hotel room, but I didn't want to have anything to do with it because I didn't believe in all the hocus pocus stuff. You know how we Americans are. I didn't want to hear it, you know. And they said this person won't leave until they talk to you. And I'm like, what do you mean they want to talk to me? I don't even want to get involved. I'm in another room and they're in there doing what they do. And they kept saying she won't live. That's why in the book, the shaman is a female,
Yeah.
because my experience was with a female shaman or
Okay.
Sangoma. And they said she needs to tell you something. And I didn't want to hear it. But eventually I gave in and I went in there, and she had the bones and she did what she did, throwing the bones, and she was tossing them up and it kept pointing at me. So she said some things to me. I don't want to go into details about what she said. That may be in my next book.
Okay.
But she told me some things that really happened in my life. And that made me start to dig into the life of a shaman. Well, what is this all about? All my friends in Africa, I started asking them about that. And come to find out that people, mostly Europeans, live their lives based on the counsel of a shaman. It's like a ministerial or a guide or a counselor, and they actually live their lives based on the counsel of a shaman. It's like a doctor or medical advice that we would get from a doctor. They really live their lives based on what the shaman says. So that's what happened with my transition. I had to bridge a gap between the ending of the book, or this mystical portion of what happens between Jonathan, Danielle, Patrick, and Stacy. I had to get a conduit, a door, to get them to that point. And that episode in my life popped in my head. And that's how the shaman came to life in the book. And I said, in order for this to work, they have to go see a shaman. So I just went through my own experience. They experienced what I experienced. You know, the horseback, the traveling through Africa into the jungle. I actually did that, and going to this hut and this woman, you know, beautiful, beautiful woman, you know, popping up. And of course, I added a little bit more to their experience, but the basis of what they go through in the publication in the book is what I went through in my life. So that's how the shaman came
That's
about.
great. And what's really neat about that, it sounds like when you at the outset of the book, that wasn't really planned, that part of it.
It wasn't.
And then it came to you, right? Based on a real
It's,
life experience.
it's funny, Roger. It wasn't planned. It really was not planned. But it made sense to me. And again, like I said, as it progressed, you know, it made sense for them to visit Africa, which is what I did. As I mentioned, and it was Jonathan's first time on African soil. And I remember my reaction when I hit African soil for the first time as an African American man, you know, hearing the old stories about they don't like us, Africans don't like us, is total crap. When I got there, I was like an American king to them.
They
And that's
embrace
how they treated Jonathan, you know, and it just made sense, the progression when they got there. It's just started happening. And as I wrote, like there's another character in the book, they had this tour guide. And I actually had this tour guide and I actually used his name. I tried to get his permission by contacting him, calling back to, but I couldn't find him. So I wrote it anyway.
it.
But yeah, his actual name is in the book. And
That's
he
neat.
took them to this person, and that's how it happened with me.
That's so great. And you talked a lot, John, about how long this process took, over 17 years or whatever it was. Do
Yeah.
you feel that um, the characters matured in your, you know, in your mind over that time? For example, if 10 years ago, if you had put the book out, I would assume that it wouldn't be nearly as good as it is today.
I agree.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So if you could
Yeah.
answer the
Well,
question, then I have a follow-up question.
I actually remember 17 years ago, technology wasn't the same. So my original writings, I had to change a lot of the things because, you know, cell phones came into play and technology
Right.
changed, their experiences has changed. There were television programs that I had mentioned in my early writings that were no longer on television. So I had to change all that. And as it, as times changed and our world changed and technology changed, it also, that's why I had to bring in younger and new, what I'll call ghostwriters, to help me with the editing process, because I'm not a technological person by any means. That's why it took you and I a minute to get this going, because I couldn't figure out how to get my microphone on, so, or my video on. So as you're right, Roger, as time changed, I mean, and it changed probably 3 or 4 times, because we're talking in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, things were different. And then they changed from that. So it had to continue to change. So I had to bring in people that was, you know, millennials, let's put it that way, millennials that kind of went through the old guard to the new guard. They kind of bridged the gap
Very cool.
between the old guard and the new guard. And I brought in millennials. I also brought in some Gen Z or Gen Y, whatever these, whatever they call it now, and I had them read it. I had book clubs read it, and they all kind of gave me twists, you know, to how it should be to make sense today to today's readers, because my market is, some would say it's a chick flick, but I don't think it's that. I think it's for everybody. But I think my major market, I would say, is probably females, from grade school all the way to adult life. So I had to bring in a little bit of everybody to make it make sense. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for asking that question, by the
Oh
way.
yeah. Now, is there any part of the time, because I'm writing my own novel as well. I'm 12 years in, so
Really?
yeah, I'm getting antsy to get it out, which I plan to do this year. But is there any part of your experience, was there any fear in releasing it? Fear of just the unknown and being a first-time author?
Yeah.
Did that play into it at all?
My biggest fear, Roger, I think, going all the way back to day one, was somebody taking my story. Not by reading it, but I thought maybe this concept would come out, or something very close to it. That was my biggest fear, that, this great story that I had in my head, that someone else would write it or something very similar to it.
Yeah.
That was my biggest fear. But I have to admit, it was over a 17-year period. And I purposely asked this question to everybody that hears the story. I think I tell the story better than I wrote the story, but everyone that heard the story, regardless of what age or what genre, they all say the same thing. We've never heard or read anything like this. So after about the 10th year, like you said, you start to feel antsy, you want to get this thing out. But I think time in this case is going to benefit me greatly.
Yeah.
Because when no offense to what we see on television or what we read, there's a lot of non-readable or watchable stuff that's out there. And I also purposely wanted to talk to avid readers and avid television watchers, people that are in the industry. And I wanted to get their opinion, and they all have the same reaction. So to answer your question, that was my only fear, because I was confident in the material. I knew it was different. So I felt that confidence, that I knew it was probably something that was really good. So that didn't bother me, but the fear of having someone write something close to it was.
Awesome. Um, I can't help, and I think you may have mentioned it earlier on, but what do you think about the possibilities of this becoming a screenplay or a movie?
Oh, that's my goal. That would be a major blessing. As a matter of fact, again, thanks to everybody involved, including AR team. Um, it is in the hands of a Hollywood screenplay writer, producer. This individual has written pilots. He's won awards for his screenplays and so forth, and requested a copy of the book. So, that's the very beginning of the process. But, I think it's big screen or screening service worthy, but that would be my most significant accomplishment if and when I can get there.
That's awesome. John, if you don't mind, I'd like to pause and show the people that are on YouTube the trailer. Do you mind?
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
Let's do that.
Let's go.
Tale of friendship. Is there a difference between friendship and love? How deep can friendship go? Jonathan, Danielle, Patrick, and Stacy took a journey to that next level of closeness. The essence of the story is actually detailed on the book cover. The story rewinds to the beginning of their young lives, and it's not just a great read, but a life-altering event. To experience what the characters felt, feel the tragic circumstances. We've heard of two souls becoming one, but four? Some would say this is fiction, but is it really? Dialogue about the love of friendship. Embrace yourself, because in the end, the epilogue reveals a major twist. Experience the story. Embrace It. Buy Closer Than Blood by John Kinney, now on Amazon, and visit the website at www.closerthanblood.com for more information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really brings the emotion of the story to life. So really
Yeah.
happy to get that done.
That's the work of American Real Publishing. I think Roger Harvey. Um, yeah, if you could, when you do see the video, the book trailer, the dramatic music in the background, Roger did an amazing job with the visuals, and I'm kind of high maintenance, but he worked with me from in every detail, and at the very end. It was his idea for me to narrate it. I didn't want to, but he said it
It
would be
came out
good.
great.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so thank you, Roger Harvey.
Absolutely. So audiobook, you have an audiobook in the future. Tell us about
Yes.
that and why you decided to go that route.
It's really simple. Today in 2024, everyone that I talk to about the book, the first question they ask, "Hey, do you have audiobooks?" Because I drive in my car, I listen to these books. Literally, Roger, I probably heard that 100 times this week. Hey, the audiobook, the audiobook. So, although it wasn't part of my game plan in the beginning, I think it's very important because even my own family, I come to my house or my kids' houses, and they're listening to some type of audiobook.
Yeah.
And
Getting
that's the way
popular.
that's the way the world is going. So I think it's very important to work into the repertoire.
No doubt. And as we say internally here, we basically have to meet the reader where they are. If they like ebook, you provide an ebook.
Yeah.
If they like hardcover or paperback, you do that. If they like audiobook, you do that too. So
Yeah.
really good, smart marketing move on your part.
Thank you.
This has been a great conversation, but what's next? What's the next steps for Closer Than Blood? As you think about going from book to film.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned you have someone working on that, but what's the timing of that look like?
Well, it's hard to judge the timing because again, it may never happen, but that's the dream and that's the goal. So I've been talking to getting a lot of phone calls. So as you probably know, the process is a film pitch. You have to get a production company interested, um, and their requirements are a film pitch. And included in a film pitch is a screenplay. So the first step is to get a screenplay done. And of course, you can't. I'm not a script writer, so I'm in the process of looking for script writers. So contact me if you can. www.closerthanblood.com. Contact me if you are a script writer. So that's the first thing is to get a script done, and then once you get the script done, there's a process to putting your film pitch together. And the film pitches that goes in front of investors for these movie production companies. I've had some contact with Columbia people that represent, I would say, people that represent Columbia Pictures, Lionsgate. Their representatives or salespeople have called me because of the material being referred to them by Amazon. And they all require, a screenplay. And so that's my next step is to get a screenplay done first and then put a script together, put a film pitch together.
Such an interesting process. I mean, it's a lot of work, a lot of commitment.
Yes.
But look, you did it. It was, like I said, a partnership to get it published, but you did the hard part. You did the writing and all the long hours of editing and self-editing. It's not easy to do. So congratulations to you. The book became a bestseller. John, before I let you go, I'd like to ask most of my guests on the show. You're still, a young guy. At the end of the day, what do you want your legacy to be? What kind of mark do you want to leave on this earth?
The one thing that I would recommend that people, if you don't read the book, read the foreword of the book, because that's pretty much my legacy. And I know she's going to kill me for this, but my daughter actually wrote that foreword. Yeah.
Wow.
And in there, she states that, and I know this, that I may not be the best writer in the world. I don't even consider myself a great writer, but I don't think there's anyone on this planet, Roger, that could tell a better story than I can. And that's what I want my legacy to be, is this guy, if you look at him, you would never believe this, but the stories that come out of his mouth are intriguing, captivating, and one of the best storytellers to ever live.
And look, that ties right back to how we started this conversation when you sat your kids down, when they were very young. And, it all comes down to storytelling. So, John Kinney, congratulations. Welcome to the American Real family. Thanks so much for being on the show. Folks, please order John's book, Closer Than Blood. You could get it on Amazon. We'll drop the links below in the show notes. And again, John, thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to American Real. For more stories like this one, be sure to stop by AmericanReal.tv. Follow us on all social media to stay up to date with everything American Real. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and contact one of our publishing experts if you're ready to publish your book and become a best-selling author.